How did it feel? And it would have changed from your first deployment to from 2007 to 2013. How did it feel when you first went there, and seeing the changes that you did during your last deployment?
So I think when we're military, so we have orders, and we have a mission. So we this is really what matters. Wherever you deploy is what really matters is what is your job, because you're part of a bigger thing. So you belong to a battalion, a regiment, a brigade, and therefore that all those parts together makes it work. So you really focus on what you have to do. You don't really think too much into the environment, but what you do as an officer, and I think that we did, is try to prepare yourself in the environment you're going. So especially Afghanistan, the British, we have a long history with Afghanistan, with the Anglo-Afghan wars, in the 19th century, which obviously didn't go too well for us. So, and I would say probably, as always, lessons were lost in terms of what happened, in the 19th century, and so you don't really do that, but you try to understand first of all the people, the people that you're gonna meet, what are they, how do they live, what is their traditions, you very quickly we got exposed to Pashtunwali, the whole, sort of a very old, Pashtun tradition of, if you have a guest, your guest is your guest for everything, and nothing can happen to your guest because he comes under your home, your protection and all that kind of thing. So you start to learn, but you don't really think too much about the environment except for mission purposes, the geography, where you are, where you're going to operate, poppy fields, the green zone as we call it, around the Helmand River. So that's very much what you do. So you don't really think too much. And we went there really understanding that it was not going to be it was not a peacekeeping mission. We knew that, we knew that it would have been, but to the extent of the fighting that happened, especially in the early years of the conflict, we probably did not expect that sort of thing. We were trained as we do, professional British Army, soldiers and officers were trained to fight, and protect ourselves and, protect whoever needs to. But I think we were not really quite sure exactly what would be, but it was a kind of excitement, I would say as well. We're going into Afghanistan, far away from what we've done before, and I think there was a kind of a discovery as well in terms of, this is a new landscape, new scenery, new kind of people, and yes, and the mission was, that we need to be prepared to fight the fight. It was something that for some of us, and we haven't done that for some time, so it was a kind of, okay, this is not a mission of humanitarian aid or peacekeeping, or it's very much, and it became like that very quickly, very kinetic. From the start, it was kinetic pretty much every day. There was something, there was contact, it was going on patrol, having a contact, and then did again and again and that sort of thing, and it became the sort of pattern of things. And I think this is where really what I saw is far more interest back home, when the public realised actually, it was proper fighting, that British soldiers were fighting an enemy, and it was just not, and we were taking casualties. And I think that sort of came into fore, but then that becomes the routine anyway. That's because that's what you do, as military, that's what we do. But I think what I saw later on when I went to the next tour was more about, it was more steady in the sense that, we were now focusing the efforts not necessarily on, I would say, on fighting, the Taliban and whoever it was, but actually it was also, helping the Afghan, and the Afghan army, and the police, just to say, right, they're going to become what we would call potentially the main effort, that was that, and say, this is not for you to, to take the fight, to the Taliban, but we will help you to do that. But it was a bit of a mix of the two, and that's really, and also I would say is the pattern of things changed, because in early in my days, early days in Afghanistan, you know, it was very much the old-fashioned, you know, what we call a contact, you know, forces against forces. So a group of Taliban, you know, a kind of ambush, you know, a bit of a firefight for some time, and then somebody goes away and we all go back and then we assess, and we do that again and again. But then they evolved because I think you know, the Taliban realized that actually nobody would win this. And this is where we saw sort of migration of IDs. You know, so IDs starting to come into the era of operations, which we didn't have in the early days of our Afghan campaign. But that came in. So therefore that changed against how we would operate, you know, how we would, you know, travel, you know, in a vehicle, you know, all that sort of things that early days we didn't really think about that. But then my second tour, that was very much, you know, and part of what you're saying about the training, our training became very focused on make sure that everybody was trained on counter ID, you know, that every soldier was able to, you know, to stop, see the signs, you know, and be able to probe and all that sort of thing, which we didn't really do at the start of the campaign. But that came part of how the campaign evolved in terms of, you know, how we were fighting the enemy. And then, as I say, towards the end, it was more, you know, the sort of the broader picture, you know, the more comprehensive approach to Afghanistan, which where the military was part of all the other, you know, sort of pillars in terms of, you know, capacity building, governance, you know, human security, you know, and we had, for example, the female engagement teams, you know, the FETs were doing a lot of work with Afghan female within the military, but also within the community. So that became far broader. So from very much a, you know, going on patrol every day, you know, having a good old firefight, like potentially we see what's going on in Ukraine at the moment, to more about going on patrol, looking at IEDs, you know, which were becoming the norm, to having the sort of, you know, broader picture where the military is not really the focus. That's probably what I saw as an evolution of the campaign in Afghanistan.
When you first went, you realised it was dangerous, basically, very quickly. And you would have seen situations that made you very aware that this wasn't just a peacekeeping mission. You're on the defence. Would you mind disclosing incidents of what you saw that made you realise that this wasn't your average mission, and as you said, you weren't used to it?
Yeah, I think you know, I can't really go into too much details of everything or where, you know, the locations and, you know, when they happened. But, you know, for example, when you are, you know, you are resting, sitting against the wall of a compound, an Afghan compound, and suddenly you have an RPG, it's like you know, a rocket coming and landing, you know, just about 2 meters above your head, with all the sort of gravel and, you know, dust and everything falling on your head. And yeah, you just realize that, you know, this is not, it's not just you to come around and, you know, smile at people and, you know, be with your peers and everything is quiet and peaceful. You realize actually, no, this is serious business. Yeah, it is. You know, that life is at stake, you know, for everybody. And but again, you know, your excellent training kicks in. You know, we are very good at training, you know, and we're very good at training soldiers to do that sort of thing. Even if we were not really quite sure what would happen, we did that well because that's the way we train. That's what we, you know, the British Army is trained for. So very much the training kicks in, and you are part of that, you know, that sort of group, and you know what you need to do. You know that you're not, you know, on your own. That you know that your peers are doing similar things that you are, and therefore, you know, so you don't really think too much. But it's. I'll give you something very British, is something that will stay with me forever. We're in Helmand somewhere in Helmand province, and we were along a ditch, you know, full of dirty water and everything that we've been crossing, and everybody was very tired, you know, very dirty, haven't eaten well for some time, been in contact. And we're sitting, and one of the young private soldiers got a shot in the arm, so he had a bandage. And because he was a fairly decent wound, he was going to be evacuated back to Camp Bastion. And in the middle of Afghanistan, he opened his body armor, and under his plate, you know, to protect it, he had I'm sorry to say that, but he had one of the special magazines that men, you know, buy in you know, in a newsagent, you know, for late nights reading, I would say. And he had that with him, and he gave that to his